Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with CEO of Seismic Wave Support, Michelle Jamison. Her expertise lies in helping businesses reimagine their customer service operations to achieve both efficiency and strong customer connections. With a track record of guiding companies through transformative customer service optimizations, she's the go-to expert for high-growth businesses, complex customer journeys, and companies struggling with customer retention and high service costs. She is passionate about turning customer service from a department into the heart of every brand. It's quite a story. Enjoy.
Well, cool. Like I said, I'm in Kansas City. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's no problem at all. I was looking forward to it.
Me too. So before we get into your good work, I want to know first and foremost, we went through this pandemic. We're entering a new year. We survived this pandemic, which we all had to pivot and move a lot during that time. How much of surviving that pandemic time period has affected your work and the way that you do things today?
The pandemic affected me a lot of ways. As you know, personally, we had to deal with family members who were sick, or we lost them, or their illnesses were exacerbated because of it. But also in having a remote workforce, you have to pivot and learn to be remarkably human. Because everybody was dealing with things they hadn't before. Even though I'd had the luxury of working from home before, a lot of my team hadn't. So now they had to juggle being an employee, being a school principal, being the lunch lady at school, being caregivers for their family. So because somebody was late or their performance dropped, it wasn't necessarily for the same reasons it would have been before the pandemic. So if anything, I learned more about being remarkably human and about having more empathy for my team and remembering that sometimes the personal bleeds over into professional, but they need support in the personal before we can get back to the professional issues.
Let me ask you this. At the end of the day, if I put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, it's career day, they're third graders, and as the CEO behind Seismic Wave Support, one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you explain your job to them?
Well, if you ask my youngest son, he says, "I sit in meetings all day and tell people what to do." But if I'm explaining it to school kids, I would tell them I help businesses become bigger and better, help them take what they do well and amplify it so that they would have a louder audience and a bigger impact in the business world.
So take me back to when you were in that chair in the third grade. What was your ideal life dream? What did you want to become?
Oh, everything. I had such a vivid imagination, and I was an avid reader. So every time I picked up a new book, I had an idea of, oh, I'd like to try that. Oh, I'd like to do this. For a long time, I thought I wanted to be a nurse until I realized I can't really do the gory stuff. But it gave me a new appreciation for them. I thought I wanted to be a teacher as well, but believe it or not, I have stage fright. I am such an introvert, and I said that might not be a good idea either. But I always enjoyed different aspects of customer service, even growing up with my first jobs and serving others through volunteer opportunities. So it kind of got me down the path of customer service work.
Talk to me a little bit about how you developed this keen business sense, a way of leading and helping companies. Take me back to where you were born and raised. What were these foundational seeds that were planted into you that ended up harvesting and evolving into who you are as a professional today?
Sure. I was born in Washington, D.C., where I still have a ton of family, but I was actually raised in Decatur, Georgia. And with that, I got to see my mother evolve in her career to a director of human resources. So with that, I got to hear a lot of stories. I got to see a lot of things when I would go to work with her and interact with her coworkers. So I learned a lot about what I wanted to do and about what I didn't want to do. And in hearing people, sitting in the break room and hearing people talk about their supervisors, it helped remind me of the kind of leader I didn't want to be. I always knew I'd like to be in charge of something someday, but it helped remind me of what I didn't want to be, because I didn't want to be talked about the way some of these people would talk about their supervisors. I wanted to be the opposite of that. And even in the beginning of my career, I got a lot of pushback from time to time because I don't have the fancy degrees, but I always had the will to work, the will to learn, the will to listen. So I didn't progress as quickly as I want to, but I was always able to find a mentor or somebody to help out. And early on in my career, not to age myself, but I worked for one of the baby bells, and our CEO told me if I remembered that I always worked for a customer service company that just so happens to provide a service or a product, I'd be okay. So from then, I always looked at my mother or my grandmothers, let's say they're end users and they're calling in, what type of experience would I want them to have? And that's how I kind of shaped myself as far as learning what I needed to do, expressing what my team needed to do, helping coach everybody to level up their game to make sure that we provided those awesome experiences to customers.
So in this pursuit of excellence, who has been kind of that hero, that role model for you in your career?
Let's see, that actually came late in the game, so to speak. I worked for a VP named Mark Shapiro, and oftentimes I would run things through him, or I'd prepare reports or a new way to do things, and I'd show him, and I'd wait for feedback. And oftentimes he didn't say anything, and I'd be trying to figure out why, and his thing was, I trust you. And that was the first time I'd been up against that. And so that kind of pushed me to make me want to be better, do better. He was always there for support if I needed him, if I needed guidance. But for the most part, he trusted me to do my job based on my past experience and what I was currently doing. And I got to learn more with him being more hands-off than some of my other leaders. I got to learn more about leading and about myself in that position than I did anywhere else, especially the places where I had been micromanaged previously.
So in the business world, what business do you admire and respect the most? Who out there is doing it the right way that you think other companies should model after?
I like, when I was in Georgia, it was Publix, because I always knew if I went in Publix, I'd have a good experience. Even if a team member was having a bad day, if I expressed concern, it would be addressed, so I would leave still feeling valued and heard. Here in Texas, I get that from H-E-B, My mother even had a bad experience when she was there. Well, it started off as a bad experience when she was there, but she spoke with the manager. And, when she walks in now, everybody speaks, everybody's friendly. It's unfortunate it came from a bad situation with one employee, but we didn't stop going because before we left, we still felt heard and valued. And we had people in from out of town who were there with us, and they even appreciated the way the situation was handled and how nice and kind everybody was to my mother. And they still went out of their way not only to solve the situation, but to coach the employee, because we still approach it from maybe she's having a bad day, let's coach her through this, as opposed to just being mad and not looking for a bigger picture solution.
So let me ask you this. If you can meet anybody, whether it's in the world of business or otherwise, that you absolutely admire and look up to, that maybe you would glean something from them that would help you in your career, who would you love to meet and hang out with a little bit?
If I was shooting for the stars, I'd say Michelle Obama. She's always gracious, poised, well-spoken, and inspiring in what she says and does. But currently, and it might sound crazy, but my co-founder, Emma Rainville, she's somebody where if she decides you're worth her time, then she puts the time into you to mentor you, help you level up. If she sees something in you, then she pours into that because she's big on leadership. So I feel like I'm in a really good position to learn more, not only about the business, but about myself, because she allows us to make mistakes. And from that, she coaches us. Okay, how can we prevent this in the future? How can we be better? So she allows us to be ourselves, and she still helps us level up at the same time.
So let me ask you this. How do you balance this life of being a successful professional, getting the job done well, helping other companies, but also evolving as a human being yourself? What is that collective energy for you?
That was something I had to take the time out to learn how to balance, to be honest. My work-life balance was off for quite some time, which isn't good because I'm a single mother with kids. So I had to learn how to prioritize. I had to learn how to work on my big three, starting every morning with, okay, these are my three priorities. If I don't do anything else today, this is what I need to do. But there's still getting time in for my kids, making sure we travel, making sure we spend time together, whether it's a game night or a movie night. But I had to learn how to, how they say, if you enjoy what you do, you don't work a day in your life. I had to get to the point in my career where I could enjoy what I do, where it didn't seem like working. So if I'm working, I'm not stressed. I have good systems and processes in place. I'm just trying to make things better. But on the back end, I'm happy because my kids are good. My kids are happy. My kids get to see me as opposed to just coming in my office and seeing me.
So let me ask you this. Speaking of youth and kids, let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into a 18-year-old version of you, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you've accumulated over time. What advice would you give your younger self?
It would be to take more risks, to be more confident. I am an introvert to my core, so oftentimes that would work against me because I might have an idea or a perception that I think, should be heard. And in the meantime, I just sit back and I watch others, take the spotlight. Not saying that they didn't have good ideas, but my ideas were valid. But they were never heard because I wouldn't speak up. And I didn't get to that point where I was speaking up until later on in my career. So I feel like if I had started coming out of my shell a little bit years prior to when I actually did, I could have excelled faster and I actually could have helped more people.
So when you look at the arc of your career, the timeline, what's the biggest risk that you've ever taken?
The biggest risk was when I took a job in a completely different country and moved my family there within a matter of weeks of accepting the job and living there for a year, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing what coming back home would look like, not only having faith that my kids would be okay, as people, as well as considering their education. Taking my mom, who was retired, who didn't like driving here in America, but yet I'm taking her to another country and asking her to figure it out. So that was a huge risk for me.
Of all of the things that you've accomplished in your life up to this point, personally and professionally, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
I am the proudest of me as a mother and the way that I've evolved from kid number 1 to kid number 5, because I've got 5 heartbeats, as I call them. And just being at different stages in my life each time, being able to pivot, still give them what they need, as well as focus on a career. I'm proud of me for doing that, because I've seen and heard stories where that balance didn't work out well, and the kids seriously suffered because of it.
So ultimately, at the end of the day, when you boil everything down, Michelle, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
The true spirit of a servant leader. I wouldn't ask my team to do anything that I wouldn't be willing to do. And oftentimes I start my meetings with, how can I support you? Because in my eye, my job is to support my team, to set them up to be successful, not only where they are right now, but as humans, where do you want to be later on? Because when we have our talks, it's not always about performance and metrics. It's about goals and stepping stones and how I can elevate them where they can take on that next role if that's what they choose to, or if they're happy in the role they're in, how they can still elevate and be the best of the best of where they are at that moment.
So, Michelle, if anyone wants to reach out, learn more about what you're doing, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place for them to go?
They can actually reach me at my Seismic Wave website. That's Michelle, Michelle, at seismicwavesupport.com.
Beautiful. So, final question, what's the best advice that you've ever gotten in your life, and what's the advice that you love giving people that are younger that you get around?
The best advice I've gotten recently was to just breathe, because sometimes we get so caught up in all the things, as they say right now, that we forget to take a moment to pause and breathe. You know, even though we feel like life is happening, so to speak, and everything is coming down on us, we have to realize we haven't gone through anything nobody else has, you know, and if we just take a minute to breathe and think through those next steps, we can still come out on top.
Beautiful. Michelle, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful new year. I appreciate it.
Thank you. You do the same.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.